Hi, my name is Sean Yarder, and this is my project over the land administration systems of Argentina. The president of Argentina is Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. The population is over 42 million, with a total land area of over 1 million square miles. It's about 4 times the size of Texas. Argentina is divided into 23 different provinces, each with its own jurisdiction. Argentina is a technologically advanced country with a literacy rate of over 98%, and over 55% of the country uses the internet. Although Argentina is a more developed country, it has gone through economic struggles in the past years. In 2001, there was an economic crisis in Argentina, so basically there were people trying to leave the country because of how bad the crisis was. In 2002, the Argentine peso was no longer equal in value to the US dollar. In 2007, there was a world recession, which of course affected everyone. In 2009, there was another Argentine recession. In 2010, there was a slight economic rebound, but by 2011, the economic growth slowed down because of high inflation rates. In 2012, there was expanded state intervention. The GDP is nearly 747 billion. The GDP per capita is 18,200, but the percentage of population below the poverty line is about 30%. There are many indigenous groups of Argentina that are struggling with land disputes. Some of the indigenous communities include the Com, the Mapuche, and the Jujuy. These communities are struggling with disputes over land because many of them do not have clear title deeds. The first indigenous group I'd like to discuss is the Com, who are located in the northeast part of Argentina in the Formosa province. The leader of the Com is Felix Diaz. They have been involved in land disputes dating back as early as 1940. In 1940, a law was passed to try to recognize the ancestral lands of the Com, but owners of land that acquired land before 1940 refused to acknowledge the Com's rights to the land. For example, there was a wealthy family named the Celias who acquired land in 1939 before the law was passed. Later on, the Celia paid for building a national park, which actually blocked the Com from accessing resources they needed on their land, and it really disrupted their traditional practices like hunting and gathering. So basically, there are some laws in place to protect the rights of indigenous peoples, but the laws are not always upheld, and there's also a lack of clarity. And there are ways to get land title, like possessing the land for 20 years and showing that you possess it by building a fence or building a house and just occupying the property for an extended length of time. But the problem is that the Com actually do not use fences, and they live in adobe houses, and a lot of times they do not meet the requirements for adverse possession. The Mapuche community is located in central Argentina, and much of their land has been acquired by foreign companies that want to use the land for its natural resources in mining practices and oil and gas extraction. The Mapuche roam around between Argentina and Chile and have also been involved in some border disputes. There's over 100,000 Mapuche in Argentina, and in 1995 there were court cases between Mapuche and the state with conflict over the indigenous lands, and in many cases the Mapuche are stopped from participating in their traditional practices of hunting and gathering. The Jujuy people in Argentina are also parts of land conflict, largely in part due to mining practices done by foreign land purchasers. In fact, the mining practices has increased by almost 2,000% since 2003. The people in Jujuy region often practice land occupation or squatting on land until they can receive title. The Jujuy would like for land to be communal land rather than owned by a single person. There's a lot of debate going on in Argentina about the increase in foreign land ownership. Argentina is a popular destination for foreigners to buy real estate, not just because it's a great vacation spot, but there's also a lot of profitable farmlands for mining and extracting oil and gas. There was a law passed recently in Argentina that limits foreign land ownership to 15%. In other words, no more than 15% of the land can be owned by foreigners. And because of all the concern over foreign land ownership, there was a survey done of the cadastral registry of the entire country to determine exactly how much land is owned by foreigners. And if you see this map, it shows the green areas show 1 to 5% of land ownership by foreigners, and then the yellow area is 5 to 10%, and the orange area is 10 to 15%. So it seems like the highest concentration of foreign land ownership is on the areas on the coast with the best agriculture, and there's not so much foreign land ownership in the high population areas like Buenos Aires. There is a specific process that's followed in Argentina for transferring title from one party to another. Firstly, the grantee needs to get a reserva, which is an offer to buy the property. Next, the grantee will obtain a boleto, which is a binding pre-contract that obligates them to move forward with the transaction. The next step would be obtaining an escritura, or title deed, which is signed by both the grantor and grantee. And lastly, the executed title deed must be registered in the land registry, which is the responsibility of the notary. The notary is actually held responsible for checking the title of the property as well. The notary is required to research the property for 20 years. In other words, they need to go back in time for 20 years to ensure there's clear title for the property. Title insurance is not customary in Argentina, but it is available. Someone can sell land that also needs to have a proper survey associated with it. This is an example of a cadastral map in an urban area of Argentina. And here's an example of a typical rural plat in Argentina. Pretty nice plat that looks to be drawn to scale with a legend and some information in the title block. So apparently there are strict standards in Argentina for a land survey. Since Argentina does have a high number of computer users and is technologically advanced, there are some online cadastral maps available. For example, the city of Cordoba, which is the second largest city in Argentina, teamed up with ESRI, the GIS company, for modernizing their cadastral map. The total land area of Cordoba is about 576 square kilometers, and there are nearly 500,000 buildings in their current cadastral registry, and they have an annual rate of growth of about 7,300 new buildings. So this example shows that Argentina does have modern technology and is capable of using a computerized cadastral registry. So Argentina does have a developed land administration system, but there are some flaws in the system. So I would like to propose a new project to be funded by the World Bank for an improved land administration system in Argentina. This will take up 4 phases. Firstly, resolving the disputes between indigenous groups and new landowners. This involves the Com, the Mapuche, and the Jujuy, who are all involved in land disputes. And many of these indigenous groups do not have clear land title because they treat the land as communal land. And in order for this land to be titled, the conflict needs to be resolved. I think the biggest problem in Argentina, as far as the land administration system goes, is the conflict between the indigenous groups and the government or new landowners who want to purchase land that's occupied by the indigenous groups. So I would focus the first phase of my project on the areas with the most conflict. So the 3 indigenous groups that are involved in conflict are the Com, the Mapuche, and the indigenous groups of the Jujuy region. So I would focus on the Formosa region, where the Com are located, and the central part of the country, where Mapuche territory is, and also in the Jujuy region. So this first phase of the project would involve sending negotiators to speak with and moderate between the indigenous groups and the new owners of the land, or those that are trying to occupy the land. So part of the money for this project would go toward compensating the landowners so they can give up some of their property to the indigenous groups. The second phase of my project would be trying to bolster the real estate market. The domestic real estate transactions need to increase, and the foreign land ownership needs to go down. And the surveys that have been done showed that the percentage of foreign land ownership in rural lands is under 6%, which is much lower than the 15% mark that is restricted by law, that only 15% or less of the land can be owned by foreigners. So in this project, I would like to lower that number even further to 10%. So only 10% of the land in Argentina can be owned by foreigners. In this project, I'm asking for a $50 million loan from the World Bank. The project should last 3 years with the first year focusing on resolving conflicts between the indigenous groups and the government, such as the Mapuche, the Jujuy, and the Com regions. The second year of the project will involve increasing domestic real estate transactions, and by modernizing the current cadastral system, it should increase the amount of transactions. To conclude my project, Argentina is a developed country that has a land administration system in place, but there are a few problems with the system. Firstly, there are indigenous groups that have communal land that is not clear of who owns the land. Also, there is an economic struggle, and then there is a lot of foreign land purchase that is being limited by the government. I would like to ask for a $50 million loan from the World Bank to start a new land administration improvement project. This project would focus on resolving the problems with the indigenous groups, so moderators would be sent out to talk with both parties and try to resolve the conflict, and a lot of the money would go toward compensating the supposed landowners that own the indigenous people's land. Next, I would put stricter limits on the foreign land ownership, and improving all these problems should naturally increase the domestic real estate market in Argentina.